If I told you 2 years ago that there would be a player only 22 years old who would join the Premier League, break the season goal-scoring record, elevate his club to their first treble in history, and score 52 goals in 51 appearances, I probably wouldn't believe you. If I then told you that the said player didn't win the Balon d'Or, I'd probably slap you right in the face. But that's the reality we're faced with today, because this year, the Balon d'Or is a two-legged race, and it comes down to two guys. The best player in football history, Argentina's king, the man who completed football, Lionel Messi, and Erling Haaland, a goal-scoring machine who just took his Man City side to their first Champions League and first treble. Now, the case for both players is pretty clear, and it's very much a coincidence that both of them accomplished such impressive feats in the same year. On one side, we have Messi, at the end of his illustrious career, leading a young Argentina team that just a few years ago were in absolute shambles to a World Cup trophy, accomplishing a feat that eluded him for so long and became the perfect cherry on top for his numerous years on Barca and Argentina. You almost can't write a better story than this. It's akin to Michael Jordan's last shot against the Jazz, a perfect send-off for a legend. And then there's Haaland, who at 22 came into the Premier League and broke a 28-year-old record for goals, helped his team and manager finally get that missing UCL championship, and made people question how a 6'4", 200-pound tank could move with so much speed and agility. In my opinion, the most dominant player I've seen since Cristiano Ronaldo himself. But what do the critics say? Who's the favorite to win the Balon d'Or? Well, if you're Insider's Betting Digest, then the answer edges toward Messi. In fact, if you're most of the media, Messi edges out Haaland by that small margin. But is that really accurate? See, despite the clear narratives portrayed on both sides of the Balon d'Or race, there are a fair share of criticisms. On one hand, it can easily be argued that Messi had a rather lackadaisical club performance by his standards, helping PSG get a League One championship that they probably would have got without him. On the other hand, although Haaland scored a lot of goals, it was players like Rodri, De Bruyne, and Bernardo Silva that scored the crucial goals that got Manchester City across in the knockout stages. But what does that Balon d'Or even mean in the first place? Is it the player who scores the most, the player who wins the most, or is it all subjective, an eye test that is unique to each and every individual? In my opinion, it's how much a player contributes to winning. Simple as that. How valuable is that player for a team to win championships? Based on that metric alone, both Haaland and Messi are in a class of their own. In the World Cup, I believe there were 4 moments where if Messi hadn't stepped up to the plate, we would be talking about the French World Cup repeat. The first of which is the goal against Mexico that revives Argentina's spirits after their loss to Saudi Arabia. Then there's the goal against Australia, which was Messi's first in the knockout stages. The assist to Molina, which till this day no one can understand how Messi saw that pass in the first place. And the last of which is the goal in the finals, which put Argentina 3-2 up against France. Without each of these goals, it can be argued that Argentina could have easily lost. In these moments, the momentum was not with Argentina, and it took a piece of Messi brilliance to swing the pendulum. In the case of Haaland, however, there are not necessarily moments where he changed the course of a championship run. After all, the Premier League is a lengthy 8-month affair that more measures a team's consistency, and Man City had help from other players to dominate the Champions League. And I think this is where the bookies began to choose Messi over Haaland. His moments of individual brilliance are more clear-cut. And this is a fine argument, and if Messi does end up taking the Balon d'Or, I'll be absolutely content with the result. After all, he's my favorite player of all time and quite literally the greatest. But I think there are a couple of things we don't factor into this situation. If you didn't watch the World Cup and only looked at the stats, it would look like Messi single-handedly carried Argentina to a championship. But if you did watch the World Cup, then you would quickly realize that this was not the narrative at all. In fact, I would go as far as to say that Messi's teammates put in some of the best, underrated performances I've ever seen. If Enzo Fernandez doesn't replace Lo Celso in the squad, I promise you Argentina does not win against France. It's insane how much control and quality he brought to the Argentina midfield. Without De Paul literally acting as Messi's bodyguard, putting his entire body on the line for every 50-50 ball, every tackle, that Argentina midfield would have been overrun just like that. In fact, it seemed the entire team was playing for Messi. I've never seen a squad of non-superstar players put in such a dominant, aggressive, well-oiled machine of a performance than Argentina in the 2022 World Cup. I've never seen a player refer to himself literally as Messi's bodyguard. So I don't like the narrative that Messi carried his team to the World Cup, because take out Fernandez, or De Paul, or Alvarez, or even Otamendi for Christ's sake, and Argentina would have easily been knocked out. This was as much a team performance as I've seen, and I think the value that each player brought to the table was more equivalent than what it says on the stat sheet. In Erling Haaland's case, I think we underrate his impact on the team. Because let me tell you something, it is not a coincidence that Manchester City wins the treble the year Haaland joins the club. What we fail to understand about purely looking at a stat sheet is that each player very much impacts the result of a match without scoring. See, the problem with Man City over the past couple of years, to put it simply, is that they had a lack of dominance. Sure, they had all the tiki-taka possession in the world, but they lacked a player that would put the fear in a defender's eyes. A player that would be so dominant that all eyes of the other team would be on him. A player whose gravity would suck the space so that other players could flourish. A proper number 9. And Haaland added that side to Man City. They were not so readable on offense anymore, because while teams before could wait as Man City passed around the ball trying to crack the code, the center backs now had to worry about a 6'4" tank who could just as easily score from a devastatingly simple cross. It messes with your head. Haaland's mere presence affected the positioning, the aggression, and the spacing of the defense. So while I like to view Messi as being the head of a well-oiled machine of a team, I like to believe Haaland is more of a key that unlocked all the problems of a team that seemed to never be able to cross that finish line. And maybe that's the most valuable a player can be.